Welcome to the SPE podcast, powered by the Society of Petroleum Engineers. You're listening to SPE Live 2025 SRMS Update, expanding the framework for CO2 storage resources classification and management. The audio for this episode was previously recorded on July 7th, 2025.
Welcome to this SPE Live, titled 2025 SRMS Update, expanding the framework for CO2 storage resources, classification, and management. My name is Scott Fraley. I'm a reservoir engineer for the Illinois Geological Survey at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to purchase the supplementary SRMS bundle available in One Petro. It's something new SPE is offering as a combination of the guidelines and the SRMS. Once purchased, you'll have access for the lifetime of your account, and any future updates of the materials will be added to your account at no additional cost. Scan the QR code for more information. Today's SP Live will last 30 minutes. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat during the program. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guests. Savah Thibault is a Total Engineer in Energy's CO2 geological storage expert. He started his career with Sleipner CO2 storage modeling and monitoring back in the 2000s. He's the chair-elect of the SPE CO2 Storage Resources Committee, which is responsible for matters relating to estimating, classifying, categorizing, and reporting CO2 storage resources in the context of the CO2 Storage Resources Management System, or the SRMS. Savah is the co-author of 2 books and over 40 publications on CCUS. His works on pressure impacts on saline aquifer CO2 storage resources are now the reference of the EU CCUS directive guidance documents for national assessments. Daniel DeLuzio, who works for Chevron's Global Reserves and Storage Group, where he is a vice chair of Chevron's Storage Advisory Committee, responsible for the assurance of Chevron's CO2 storage resources, and a vice chair of Chevron's Reserves Advisory Committee for Oil and Gas Resources. Dan has 40 years of global industry experience with prior roles in Shell, Total, Newfield, and Encana in various engineering and management roles. Dan has been a member and prior chair of the SPE Oil and Gas Reserves Committee since 2011 and chaired the PRMS 2018 Update Subcommittee. Dan holds BS and MS degrees in petroleum engineering from Louisiana State University. Savah, Dan, welcome to this SP Live. In addition to just what our updates are in the 2025 SRMS, we have different discussion points for the SRMS in general. And so, Dan, if you could get us kicked off by just telling us a little bit about what are CO2 storage resources.
Thanks, Scott. Yes, for just in general, CO2 storage resources background. So the storage resource classification system was developed leveraging the international recognized system from oil and gas, the Petroleum Resource Management System, or PRMS. And the storage resource definitions were published initially when we updated and published the Storage Resource Management System in 2017. And so that back in 2017, the storage resources were defined and updated recently in this year as describing the quantities of CO2 that can be potentially stored long-term in geologic formations by projects. So the term potentially, I mentioned earlier, provides the identification and maturation of projects to a commercial status, which requires a high confidence of containment of CO2 to be achieved when it reaches that commercial status, and therefore removing that potential qualifier adjective. So it encompasses the full range of the different projects that may be envisioned, and the identification of these storage resources is not a single value. It's not just one number, but it provides a range and an assessment of the potential that will be stored in the upcoming projects based on uncertainties, which we evaluate, whether it's surface, subsurface, or commercial elements. Storage resources apply to all types of rock, various types of projects, which may be on depleted oil fields or new areas with saline aquifers or within CO2 EOR projects. Storage resources are evaluated from a date. And so that from that date, we can always understand what has been already injected and what is forecast to be injected into the future for that long-term permanent storage. And as well allow for economic determination and assessments of progress in comparisons to forecast. The assessments of storage resources differentiates discovered and undiscovered quantities based on a project's maturity assessment. And the focus is on the potential storage quantities that can be matured to that commercial storage project, which will commence injection. The assessment also encompasses storage quantities that have been stored to date and quantities that will not be developed but are defined as inaccessible. So it's understanding the pore space and the classification of the project within that to identify what are those storage resources. I hope that gives you an overview of what storage resources are.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. So that makes me ask the question then, why was the SRMS developed by SPE and the other sponsoring organizations? Saman?
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. So basically, as explained by Dan, so the SRMS builds on the success of the SPE PRMS, Petroleum Resource Management System, elaborated on the same concepts, which is now an industry standard for oil and gas resource management. So basically the SPE, together with a set of sponsoring societies, and I'm going to name a few of them, so WPC Energy, the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, the Society of Petroleum Evaluation Engineers, the Society of Exploration Geophysicists, the Society of Petrophysicists and Well Log Analysts, and the European Association of Geoscientists and Engineers. All these guys felt such a resource management system was necessary to provide clarity and confidence in CO2 storage resource assessments. Basically, the central point, as explained by Dan, is that 1 gigaton of CO2 prospective storage resources is not the same as 1 gigaton of contingent storage resources or 1 gigaton of capacity. Basically, if you read a storage assessment in a basin or a specific storage site saying, oh, there is 1 gigaton in this single site here, we encourage the assessor and the reader to ask first, what are the uncertainties around this number? And this could be geological, surface, meaning development types, economical uncertainties, and how mature is the project that would deliver such resources.
Thank you, Samal. So then, Dan, you touched upon this, and you opened up telling us about CO2 storage resources, but so if you would like to elaborate about the background and the reason for this SRMS update.
Sure. Since the SRMS was published in 2017, we've seen widespread adoption of it, and in that usage, the practitioners have provided some insights on improvement areas, and as well we solicited comments in a comment period on just other practitioners, regulators, anyone that wanted to provide stakeholder feedback on practices to improve it. And so that with all of that input, obviously with the first initial version, there's definitely improvements from the first version that can be incorporated. And with that, SPE and its sponsors, mandated that the SRMS would be evergreen. And with that, we took into account the stakeholder feedback from the various practices and its usage, and then proceeded to update, to clarify, and make improvements. And so it's much more useful and related, much more relevant to the applications of practitioners today and the type projects that we see. So the CO2 Storage Resource Committee, the CSRC, set up an update committee working group back in 2022 and proceeded to work through all of the feedback and go through the sister societies to validate the adoption of an agreement of the updated terminology and drafts, And with that, we published earlier this year in 2025, which was the bundle which you mentioned earlier, Scott. We had hundreds of comments from across the world, and we thank everyone who took the time to contribute, because it does make it a better document for the industry in general. And so and we will continue as the SPE and sponsors to maintain it evergreen as we go forward, and look to definitely incorporate updates and have notionally put in a time frame of 2030 to 2035. But depending on the need for updates will also be taken into account. But a regular update to maintain evergreen, the SRMS, is key. And
in your role as a member of the update subcommittee, are there any key changes to the SRMS that come to mind?
So when we updated it from 2017 to 2025, some of the main key influences was definitely adding the EOR aspect of EOR projects to be incorporated as one of the fundamental type of projects to be evaluated. Also, there was a significant influence on the clarity of what a discovery means. And having a discovery requires that geologic integrity with the seal, faults, and everything else to maintain and validate a high confidence of containment, as well as that geologic integrity coupled with the wellbore integrity as well, to ensure that containment will be that high confidence in order to progress forward up to mature a project for storage. Another key change which occurred was the clarification of the commerciality test, what it is and how a project moves from that perspective to contingent and into that storage capacity class, with the changes to commerciality tests and the hurdles required in order to reach the storage capacity which has achieved full commerciality. And to have that clarity for a project is fundamental for having the visibility of this both technical confidence of succeeding, and as well the economic viability being present as well. So overall, it's about making the system a much clearer, more usable, and more robust for real world projects that we've come across.
Thank you, Dan. I've heard a lot about the SRMS and what purposes are, but Sylvain, what are some of the entities, organizations, agencies that might be the primary users for the SRMS?
Thanks. Yeah, indeed, I would list three types of users. First, of course, CO2 storage operators. So today, mainly oil and gas companies who would like to eventually capture or transport, but indeed store CO2 into the deep underground. And also maybe tomorrow dedicated CO2 storage companies. Then the second type of users would be resource holders, meaning states typically, wanted to reach national decarbonization objectives. Then they need clarity on how this is achievable, on whether indeed CO2 storage will be a component of these decarbonization pathways, how fast, how reliable it is. So there is a question of time frame, of quantity. So how much there are? Do they require lengthy drilling, seismic campaigns? Are they ready for project deployment already? So the third type of users would be, of course, emitters who are going to decarbonize their plant to capture their CO2. So, of course, these industrial entities or companies, they need to understand, to have clarity on where their CO2 will be stored, of course, at what cost, and what is the confidence that indeed this will properly work. And the SRMS typically provide them this type of confidence. And let us not forget about lenders, insurance company, that also need to understand this business in order to make it happen.
All right, thank you, Sylvain. And with these types of users in mind, Dan, all resource management systems require framework. What can you tell us about the storage classification and categorization framework of the SRMS?
The framework of our classification system is the key to understand how we classify quantities in a project for that range of confidence, starting with whether it's undiscovered or discovered, and also incorporating whether we already have stored quantities as well. So the framework is a principle-based view of our classification of a project and allows it to, you can see the maturity of the project as it reaches commerciality in its classification when it goes from the prospective to contingent storage resources and then upwards to the commercial status being a storage capacity classification. So it's very important. Those are the classes of when it matures upwards, but also to have the broad range of what is its range that it will store for the project and not having. So you have a confidence range also being identified for that project, which incorporates commercial, subsurface, as contracts and a number of other aspects. So provides the reader with the information and confidence in the quantities cited for use in understanding the project, the scope of the project, its current status and maturity, and allows decision makers and portfolio management folks a visibility of that project and its potential value and as well its compliance.
All right, thank you, Dan. And we've heard many instances this morning about the emphasis on projects. Savant, would you elaborate a little bit more on the importance of the SRMS being project-based?
Yes, indeed. The project is what joins the CO2 source, capture at an industrial site, to the subsurface geology, where it's going to be stored. Basically, CO2 storage resources need to be evaluated in the context of a specific storage project plan. I would make an analogy with oil production, for example. You could say, okay, I have some volumes that I have identified in the underground. However, depending on the project I use, whether I will produce it through natural depletion, through water flooding, through EOR technologies, then I may end up with very different resources. So this is just the same with CO2 storage. Your resource depends on how you plan to inject your CO2. So a project includes a site, a geological formation, injection and monitoring plans for both the injection phase, the post-injection phase, and infrastructures, such as the number of wells, approvals, commercial arrangements. The same geological formation could hold, as just said, different storable quantities using different injection rates, well design, etc. Aligning to the project-based make it clear and how storage will be achieved. We don't say geological formation can store X million tons. We say with this project, we can store X to Y million tons. So one final thought on project-based. By thinking as a project, it allows description and understanding of what steps are necessary to move through the classification system to be easily understood. Essentially, it makes the project tangible, allowing for more transparent resource management.
You, Salam. You've been talking about projects. If you could continue, Dan mentioned one of the key changes in the SRMS was commerciality. What does it mean for a project to be commercial in order to recognize storage capacity as a resource of the resources?
Yes, to be commercial and classified as storage capacity, the project must pass a commerciality test. This means that the entity claiming storage capacity has demonstrated firm intention to proceed, which is commitment, and the criteria for commerciality. So SRMS lists 8 criteria for commerciality, which you will find easily in section 2.1.2, and I will go through these criteria. So first criteria is evidence of a technically mature and feasible development plan with high confidence. You're not invoking new technologies or something like that. Second is evidence of financial appropriations being in place or having a high likelihood of being secured to implement the project. Third criteria is evidence to support a reasonable time frame for development. You're ready to implement it. Fourth criteria is evidence that necessary transportation, processing, injection facilities are available or will be made available. The fifth criteria is evidence that legal, contractual, environmental, regulatory, government approvals are in place or will be forthcoming, together with resolving any social concerns. So you may know that storage license applications may be a very important process under various jurisdictions. So the sixth criteria is a reasonable expectation that the project will be economical going forward. This assessment is performed on the estimated entitlement, forecast quantities, and associated cash flow on which the investment decision is made. Then the seventh criteria is a reasonable expectation that the project will meet defined investment and operating criteria. And the last criteria is reasonable expectation that there will be sustained demand, which is emission sources for storage for this project, and that the expected storage quantities are sufficient to justify the development. So there must be a similar confidence that the produced stream can be appropriately managed. So this section, again, 2.1.2, gives further information on these criteria. And there is quite a lengthy new section, which is 2.2.6, project scenarios that gives some additional guidance on project descriptions and applications of economic tests, such as license to operate CCS project, integrated project, merchant projects, and EOR projects.
Thank you, Savan. I thank you both for the discussion. We've got a few audience questions I'd like to go to now. From Energy Stream user Surendra Mataha, does SRMS consider post-storage physical, chemical, and microbial changes in the geologic reservoir? Savan?
Yeah, so thank you, Surendra Bateja, for asking this question. Indeed, to be stored, to be accounted as storage resource, there must be a clear, there must be clarity on how CO2 will be stored on the long term, and you have listed these storage trapping mechanism: physical, chemical, microbiological, etc. So we're not saying you should store CO2 a specific way, or such that it should dissolve, or it should be structurally trapped under a structure, or whatever mean. But the assessor has to demonstrate indeed that through these processes, CO2 will be stored on the long term.
All right, thank you, Saval. From Energy Stream viewer Mike Blinko, Dan, is commerciality always defined in terms of net present value or other financial metric, or does a viable project also include less tangible value, quote unquote, definitions?
So a good question. So there's, in our commercial determination, there are several different elements within that commercial determination. One is just NPV positive, which is similar to oil and gas, but then there's also hurdle rates and other things which are decision that drive commerciality aspects, which are specific to various entities making decisions. And so there, I want to differentiate those in terms of the financial metrics, because each different entity may have different financial metrics of how they use it. But we require commerciality to be present and to be demonstrated. And from a economic standpoint, just has to be cash flow positive, point forward, very similar to how oil and gas is treated as well. It is not a life cycle assessment, which is a different viewpoint. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. And got another question here from Energy Stream viewer Jup de Coke. Why in the translation from PRMS to SRMS is prospective resources, prospective storage resources, contingent storage resources, but reserves is capacity? In Jup's experience, the term capacity can lead to some confusion. For example, pipelines have capacity can refer to a rate, not a volume. What was the reason for using the term capacity and not something like storage reserves? Dan?
So first point is we didn't want to have the oil and gas classification of reserves applied. The second portion is capacity is a key term, and it's used in the sense of what is the limiting quantity applied to that project. It can be a source, it can be the store, and in understanding the minimum, what is that restrictive quantity that defines a project is key, and that is how the capacity was used initially. And so that was initiated in 2017, and there was debate and some suggestions from stakeholders and feedback about that, and we did debate it quite a bit, and it was decided to be maintained as capacity to have that clarity of what is the project capacity which is assigned, not the larger store, which can be incorporated in other aspects of additional projects to be incorporated. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, and along the lines, Dan, of just different types of definitions, does the CSRC or CO2 Storage Resources Committee offer SRMS training?
Oh, yes. So the CSRC does, the CO2 Storage Resource Management Committee has put together training, and the next course that will be offered on the training will be at the ATCE, which I believe the course is an all-day course, which is scheduled, I believe, for October 19th, Sunday, October 19th. And they will be other courses which will be attached typically to different workshops or conferences with these similar subject matter. So look for the conferences and training attached.
All right, very good. Well, we're very, very close to being finished here. Savon, Dan, any closing comments, thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
So from my perspective, I recommend the usage of the SRMS within the industry. It's got a lot more broader acceptance, and in discussing with partners and other regulators and other aspects, it's become a common playing field and understanding what a project looks like and how to assess it. So it allows the users, whether they're financial, whether they're decision makers, regulators, or governments, to understand the project's assessment, a project status at various stages of maturity, and allows for evaluation metrics and even accounting to handle post-monitoring cost and other ADR costs, which are abandonment, decommissioning, and restoration. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Savon?
Yeah, so just to continue on this route, I think, as you know, CO2 EOR has been here for decades. Also, CO2 storage in silent aquifer has been there for also decades, or more than 25 years in its life now. However, now we have a new industry which is coming, which is called merchant CCS, whereby new stakeholders have to find a way to capture and store CO2, some capturing, some storing. And again, this SRMS enables to provide confidence and clarity to help kick this industry. And we certainly hope you will all like it, this SRMS system.
Yeah. Thank you, Samal. Thank you, Dan. And thank you for SPE, and thank you for our audience for joining here today. Appreciate all the different questions and comments that we had for discussion. We'll see you next time on SPE Live.
Thanks for listening to the SPE Live podcast. For more content, visit the SPE Energy Stream, the industry's digital pulse, at streaming.spe.org. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe and review. Join us next time on the SPE Live podcast.